Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we are going to return to the political narrative and talk about the unification of Japan, the process by which the Warring States period ended, and you saw the establishment of the last warrior dynasty, well, the last warrior government of Japan, the last samurai government, the Tokugawa government. Um, as we were talking about the last time, the introduction of gunpowder, new recruitment techniques, stresses on the economies of these warring states really had the effect of making some of them grow, the bigger ones grow at the expense of the smaller ones. Certainly an element of skill played into that, though. And the unification of Japan, as much as it is a story of resources and new tactics and things like that, is also a story of the actions of the people who go down in history as the three unifiers: Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. Three players who, at different points, played a leading role in the unification of Japan, and by various means helped to end this period of internal division and create something really new in many ways. This process of unification really took place at the very end of the 16th century, although the developments, as we've seen, that played into it had been going on for a while. And so, Oda Nobunaga was the first of these great unifiers, and I want to talk about him first. He has gone down in history as a brilliant war leader, and there is no evidence to, or there is no reason to dispute that. Time and time again, he commanded spectacular victories. His first battle, the Battle of Okehazama, where he defeated the army of his eastern neighbor, Imagawa Yoshitomo. That battle was a desperate affair where he was outnumbered more than 10 to 1, and he still split up his forces and ambushed the Imagawa army in a night attack, scattered them completely, and killed the enemy general. He was somebody who was certainly very much able to take the military assets at his command and transform them into incredible victories, but then also to capitalize on them politically. He was a certain kind of individual, a ruthless individual, but he was also very smart. So who was he? He was a daimyo of a domain here in Owari province, around what is today the city of Nagoya, or Nagoya as it's pronounced in Japanese, a very fertile area, a plain, very productive in terms of agriculture, lots of people living there. Geographically, it's very small, but it's also very strategic. Not only is it productive, it's also at the crossroads of the Tokaido, the eastern sea route, which basically was the main route from Kyoto to Edo, skirting the Pacific sea coast, and also from other routes from central Japan leading to western Japan, and is basically as convenient a location as you'd want if you were trying to build a great hub of transportation, agriculture, and eventually production as well. There's quite a bit of pre-modern industry that sprang up around this area as well. Well watered, just a great place. And he was heir to a clan which, the Oda clan, as a minor, which was doing well, but was certainly not a truly great player in the region. He had an interesting childhood by some accounts. He pretended to be deranged. He was very eccentric. He made all sorts of strange noises, inappropriate comments, and people thought that this person, upon inheriting the clan from his father, would just make a mess of it. Actually, it seemed that this was a pose, that Oda found it safer to pretend to be completely inept so that he was not assassinated. This is a story that's actually repeated oftentimes in world history. Some of the Byzantine emperors, Basil the Bulgar Slayer, Basil II, was another one of these people, for example, pretending to be either mad or just completely depraved so that nobody bothered to kill them. And then when they came into their own, they showed what kind of men they were. Oda, as I said, was a brilliant strategist. He was also able to leverage the immense agricultural, or the impressive agricultural production of Owari province into tax money, and with that money to equip fairly large armies. Despite the fact that his domain was not large, as I said, it was populous and fairly rich. He bought guns, he trained his men in the use of guns, and he was also a very good politician in some ways. He was good at making marriage alliances. He, for example, married a princess. Very high-born daimyo daughters were called princesses. Married the princess of a very successful warlord immediately to his north, in Mino province, and secured his northern flank here, and basically doubled his holdings, and acquired also very important mountain passes. And he was very good at doing things like this. He was also good at dividing up opposition. He was certainly not above encouraging dissent in his enemies, and did this successfully at times. He was also, however, absolutely ruthless. If you've heard the expression steel fist in a velvet glove, this guy was all steel. There was no glove to speak of. He crushed his enemies completely, and he held grudges to the extent that some people didn't trust him. He was betrayed by allies on a number of occasions. In one occasion, he was actually lured into the depths of somebody's territory who he thought was his ally. Then this daimyo turned on him. Nobunaga barely got out alive. He was defeated at times, and he never forgot it. He never forgot a humiliation. He never forgot a slight. And he went on to command armies very effectively, and also to crush his enemies completely. If you had offended him, you knew that he was coming for you, and you weren't necessarily willing to share the political landscape with a person like that. People regarded him as a great threat, and eventually this did do him in. He was, however, very loyal to his allies. If we can go back to this map for a second, here are the Oda lands. Here were the former Imagawa lands. Here he defeated the Imagawa, and as in that battle of Okehazama that I was talking about earlier, and as a result, he actually freed a hostage that the Imagawa were holding, who was none other than the third unifier, Tokugawa Ieyasu, whose lands were here in Mikawa province, and Tokugawa and Oda Nobunaga formed a very stable and very good alliance, working relationship that turned into an alliance, and the two were able to count on each other. So if you were Nobunaga's friend, and if you remained loyal to him, and of course provided you were successful, you could really be rewarded. And Tokugawa really took advantage of this relationship, but so did Oda. He was certainly capable of cultivating people who could help him. He also saw the independent military power of Buddhist monasteries as just a great threat, if not even a greater threat, than the power of neighboring samurai lords. And he was very single-minded in crushing the power of all of these religious institutions. For hundreds of years, these monks had armed themselves, had attracted warriors to them, had taken over sponsorship of local villages, had taken over land bequeathed to them by locals, and had built up these immense armies with which now they functioned in some ways just in the same manner as these samurai domains, with the exception that Buddhist temples had branch temples in many Japanese provinces, and so these Buddhist monasteries were in fact even more difficult to fight against than somebody in some respects than somebody who was just across the river. There is a samurai lord, his lands are all centered around his castle. With these temples, you might be facing, in some cases, as many as 300 branch temples across the entire country. Some of the great monasteries were certainly like this, one of which was Enryakuji, which was a Tendai monastery. It was one of the oldest monasteries in Japan. In the Kyoto area, certainly. It was on Hiesan, this holy mountain. Dates back from the early 9th century. And Enryakuji was a center of opposition to Oda in the Kyoto area, especially. As Oda amassed more and more victories, as he subordinated more and more people around him, more and more lands around him, he was in a position to eventually march to Kyoto. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but in doing so, he really came into conflict with monasteries like Enryakuji, and also the Ikoiki, that popular-based apocalyptic Buddhist sect that also had many adherents in the area and all over the country. And Nobunaga's response was very typical. He killed everybody. He killed everybody who got in his way. He, especially to take an example of the example of Enryakuji, it's on top of a mountain, Hiesan. So what he did was he surrounded the monastery, very large compound, tens of thousands of people inside, monks, warriors, but also women, children, villagers, people fleeing the fighting. He circled the monastery, and he set it on fire, and he ordered his soldiers to kill everybody who ran out. Tens of thousands of people dead, precious libraries gone. This is the Japanese equivalent of burning the Library of Alexandria. It is talked about as such in historical circles. And many historians will never forgive Oda Nobunaga for this, for the act especially of destroying so much ancient knowledge. But this guy didn't care. The monks were standing in his way. He defeated the Ikoiki as well. And he also was somebody who, because of his opposition to militant Buddhism, to these monasteries, which were also independent military political powers, because of this, he was also somebody who was relatively friendly to Christians. He actually appreciated the Christians because they were religiously subversive in many ways. He wanted to break the Buddhist establishment, so he flirted with the Christians. He allowed the construction of churches, including one near his palace, and he was somebody who was certainly not above making friendly noises at these representatives of European powers if he thought he could get that could get him an advantage. And so Christianity under Nobunaga does spread throughout Japan. It's a relatively good time for Japanese Christians and for the Jesuits who are coming in to proselytize Christianity. Nobunaga, before his death, conquers 1/3 of Japan. And this certainly isn't all of Japan, but it is, if we can back up for a little bit, by 1582, he conquered basically the most important part of Japan, and these were Tokugawa lands, and the Tokugawa, as we've seen, were allied with him. So the Oda coalition basically controlled all of this, including the imperial capital of Kyoto, controlled the most, well, all but the Kanto. With the exception of the Kanto, he controlled the most agriculturally productive areas, crossroads of trade, lots of shipping. He was in a good spot. And he also, as I said, controlled Kyoto because he had come into Kyoto claiming to be on the side of the all but forgotten Ashikaga shogun. He used the the Ashikaga shogun, who had been chased out of Kyoto and deposed, as an excuse to march into the capital city and establish his own authority. He claimed to be marching on Kyoto to restore the power of the Ashikaga, to restore the power of the lawful sovereigns. But of course he was out for his own interests, and he soon fell out with the last Ashikaga shogun, who goes down to history as basically the guy who let Oda Nobunaga into Kyoto. And he, that is Nobunaga, was establishing a something that could have turned into the regime that conclusively unified Japan. He was establishing his dominance over the imperial court. He certainly controlled the traditional capital of Japan, and he was about to control more of Japan, go on more military expeditions, subdue his rivals, make allies where he could, but punish those who opposed him, when he was betrayed by a vassal, Akechi Mitsuhide, trapped in a burning temple, and either died in the fire or committed suicide, and his body was burned up in the fire. But basically, he fell victim to treachery, like so many samurai before him did. And he, in part, fell victim to treachery because some of his vassals, including this Akechi Mitsuhide, basically felt that they had more to gain by killing their lord than by following his orders, and that was in part because they didn't really trust Oda Nobunaga to be a magnanimous ruler. His ruthless streak in many ways played against him by scaring people like Akechi into thinking that their own future under Nobunaga was in jeopardy. Indeed, in some cases, their lives may be in jeopardy. Plus, there was also the blatant lust for power that, as I said, had defined samurai society for as long as there had been samurai, and so we still have not seen them figure out this problem. They would eventually, by the time the Tokugawa were done with government in Japan, a warrior government, a truly stable one, would indeed emerge. But Nobunaga did not figure this one out.